plant medicine, and how plant medicine can heal some of our ancestral traumas that we're holding on to. Some of those things that we don't even know. So many generations back, so many energies back. So I just want to create space and let's give my brothers a warm welcome. Brother Moudou and Brother Oyi.
Wow. Baba Moudou. How y'all doing? My name is Oyi's son, Team Charles, Atlanta, Georgia. And I'm just super honored to be here. I stuttered, right? Growing up, I stuttered. And I still have problems with S's. And my cousin helped me overcome stuttering because he said, why do you stutter? I was like, and I have to like talk faster so the person can like, before they turn around and stop listening to me. He was like, well, they don't have time to listen to what you have to say. You don't have to talk to them. I started talking slow, you know, and I was just like, it really wasn't about being heard from someone who really didn't have, I was giving away a lot of my power through rushing my words, right? And so I learned to slow down a little bit and look at things a lot different. And that led me to being in front of people like y'all, like a lot more often. So I just want to say I'm super grateful to be here. I'm not going to, I really think we should both be up here. I was just going to bring him out, and I was going to open an act. Tell me who you are, man. Peace, family. My name is Baba Moudou Baqui from Detroit, Michigan. And I met some of the Oakland family, you know, and I stated that we have a biannual ethnogenic psychedelic conference that's focused on our folks in our community. I was a student, and I remain a student, understudy of Baba Ahati Committee. For those who don't know, he was one of those quiet, unseen forces. He was considered one of the highest qualified martial artists on the planet. And he went to Africa and perfected martial arts skills that they said didn't exist. And he proved it worked. We're not talking about the theory, we're talking about the blood sport. And he founded this institution called Tamaric Institute, which was based on his lineage. We'll get to the presentation now, but Baba Kaleni comes from a lineage, as well as me, of freedom fighters, just like the Oakland community.
You good, Baba?
I'm tripping. I work with a lot of elders, man, so I always slap them on, because I, you know. But Baba Kaleni was a direct offspring of Bumpy Johnson. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Bumpy Johnson. Bumpy Johnson was the Godfather of Harlem. He's single-handedly, him and Queen, who's the black mob queen, sister, ran out the Italian mob from Harlem. Lucky and all of those had to keep it moving. And it's important, the reason I bring that up is because just like in the passage where we featured the street pharmacist brother, our liberation struggle, there's a fine line between liberation and illegality. And oftentimes, our greatest freedom fighters stand on that line. Boot line, area. They were all criminals by their code, right? So it's important that we understand that we don't live by legal codes, we live by the law. And the law that transcends this system. As freedom fighters, we have to be remembrance of that because there will be times when we're faced with the legal code or the law which we know is right. And so this is one of the lessons that Ahati taught me. So I'm not going to be long-winded because I don't know how the format goes, but I'm just here. I hope to be able to present later.
Did you need that projector?
I mean, not really. You know,
yeah,
I can
go in.
Okay.
Go in.
All right. Well, all right, family. Okay. Sure. Okay. All right. Well, Oyi is I need to go get a couple of notes, but I have something important I want to share with you. So, I really want to sit down and peep all of the game he's about to give, right? So I just want to warm everybody up. Is anybody into astrology in here? Any Aries in the house? Where my Aries at? Where my Aries at? Where my Taurus is at? Oh, you Taurus too? You know, April Tauruses. That's what I'm going to May Tauruses. Gemini's in the building. Where my Gemini's at? Cancer's in the building? Okay. We see you making some noise over there. Cancer from back to back. Leo's in the building. Where my Leo's at? Okay. Virgos. Where my doctor's at? My perfectionist and Katie's eyes. Alright. Libras. That's right, Harmony's in the building. And my Scorpios. We will kill you. You know what I'm saying? We will kill you. Sagittarius, all the way in the back with his passport, ready to go somewhere. You know what I mean? Immediately. Capricorns, holla at me. The law, Father Time, Santa Claus. You know what I mean? Aquariuses. What? No Aquarius? Since when? How you pull that off? And Pisces. All right, the quiet type. They pour up the drink, the bartenders in the building, the dreamers, the visioners, the poets. Yes. The reason I bring up astrology is because that's one of my crafts, and the mushrooms helped increase, or really all of the entheogens helped increase my depthness into that particular craft. But I bring it all the way back to this t-shirt. I was wondering, like, what am I going to wear, right? You know, some people wear t-shirts and they just save all the stuff. But one of my favorite t-shirts is, I am my ancestors' wildest dream. So I want everybody to look at someone beside you and say, I am my ancestors' wildest dream. I want you to mean it when you say it to them. So look at 2 or 3 people. Look them in the eye. Look them in the eye. Look them in the eye and tell them, I am my ancestors' wildest dream. You're not emphasizing wildest. Come on, Pisces. Wildest dreams. Yes. Now, right after the Detroit Psychedelic Conference, a message came down to me, and that I was, out of all the things that I know and teach on that I love, they gave me some specific instructions to only, from now on, no matter what I was talking about, marketing, relationships, revenue, building startups, blockchain, it always had to include cultivating spiritual power. All right? Now, the technology that we have currently to cultivate spiritual power is what makes us wild. It is what makes those fear us, because we are wild now, because of the technological advances in spiritual cultivation that we are all free to do. See, the 80s and 90s drugs didn't kill you. It pressed your envelope. It blew your meridians open. It blew your mind back. The deaths that we already have seen and laid down and poured liquor out for, it's prepared us for death already. And now, all of a sudden, it seems like out of nowhere, there's this entheogenic movement. Let's decriminalize it. Let's not make it a Schedule 1 anymore. Let's let everybody have access to it. Let's get wilder. Let's get back into the science of the pyramids and the metanetter. Let's get back into the sciences of astrology before we had telescopes, because you traveled inside to your multiverse, saw these galaxies, and then came out and illustrated it in the early forms of graffiti, which they call hieroglyphics. Am I making sense to anybody? Cultivating your spiritual power is your key to this magic, to this sorcery. We need more Dr. Strangers, and we need more Steve Jobs. And we need them to get together and make babies. Whether it's visual babies, imagination babies, or real mushroom babies. Right. In some cultures, the sisters get pregnant and they take 3 grams
in their first trimester. I know a 4-year-old, Kalindi's granddaughter, that can tell you the regions of the mind better than a doctor. And she'll just then go off and just drop what she's doing and go play in the mud. And I was just like, what? My cerebral cortex does what? Like, you can just like test her at any time, just point to a section. She's 4. That's the line of mushroom babies that we have to also protect and get ready for, because the questions that we're getting from the regular indigo children is already this high. What you think when the mamas give them some of that psilocybin breast milk? What's going to happen? Right? So it's our responsibility to really get serious about cultivating spiritual power. And to cultivate spiritual power, you're going to have magical tools. All right? I call it Operation Mustache. Everybody do like this. Everybody do like this. So you can't even see the mustache. Sometimes somebody else got to look at it. In psychology, it's called the Johari window. It's your own blind spots, right? They always, in the armed forces, they talk about somebody watching my 6, like looking like from what's coming behind me. But I need to be able to look at you and say, you know, I see in your aura this particular talent. You need to get on that. You got 90 days to get on this particular talent. Get on that, right? And it's right up under your nose. We making things a little too difficult. Relax a little bit, because it's a lot easier than you think. Look at somebody and say it's easy. Look at somebody and say it's easy. It's easy. Say it again, it's easy. Cultivating spiritual power is 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 easy. The sun is at the moon is at 26 degrees Taurus right now. I'm feeling myself. Feeling myself. Why? How many of you all know the middle 2 numbers of your social security number? Raise your hand. Everybody in here knows it, right? Who knows your password to some account online? Raise your hand, right? You know that. How many of you know where your Pluto is at in your chart? Right, a lot less. A lot less. You need to know your entire knowledge of self, just like you know your social security number that was assigned to you by someone else. Why? Because that's the wildest dream that your grandmother could have had. If my grandma was to come back to me, I'd be like, Grandma, my son's at 26 degrees Taurus, and the moon was at 26 degrees Taurus, and they called me up on stage to speak. Look at that. And, you know, 2 + 6 is 8, Grandma, so it was infinity. So I had to talk about magic, Grandma. And I want her to start crying and be like, I dreamed about this one day. I couldn't understand it, but I had a dream about you standing up here in front of somebody talking about magic, and they not prosecute you or persecute you. You feel me? My grandmother had to hide her magical abilities. So what happened? Who hid it then? My mother. But I didn't hide it. So when my mother seen it, she was just like, she wasn't familiar on how to cope with it. We must cultivate our spiritual power in front of our children. We must openly cultivate our spiritual power, not be ashamed of it, so the youth, like her, can see it and be like, oh, that's the norm. Because that brother that was counting the money back there in the back and pushing the crack, there was some youth walking by, look at him counting the money and pushing the crack. And they picked up the same thing. Because I did. If I walked by and saw somebody on an astrology board, I do it live on Facebook. I hold up this 3D astrology board. And guess what everybody says? Where'd you get that? That's the science. Where'd you get that? He was holding the mushrooms in there. Where'd you get that? Right? Where'd you get that? You smoking on something good, you smell it, you say, where'd you get that? We have to start holding up spiritual power so somebody can say, where'd you get that? Oh, you know, I've been cultivating it myself. It's my own stash. You know, and it's easy. And it's easy like Sunday morning. Damn, Santos, that was your line. You know? But that's just my piece, yo. Please keep cultivating spiritual power. Realize that our physical body cannot hold all of the magical energy, right? Your body's not built to do that. Your body is a caretaker, a gatekeeper, like Mansa Musa. He was a gatekeeper of great wealth, but he had camels carrying the gold. He didn't try to carry all the gold. Merlin the magician had a what? Wand, which was yielding the power, right? They make, how many television shows are on Netflix and the movies about Merlin the magician and King Arthur and the sword? It's the same story. But it's about what? A holy piece of wood, now that they call Hollywood. Holy wood. It's a tool, it's a spiritual tool. You have to start getting laced up with spiritual tools. Some of these will be revealed to you on the other side of your journeys. You must replace your fears with enthusiasm. You must replace your fears with enthusiasm. Money does grow on trees. Look at somebody and say, money does grow on trees. Look at somebody and say, money does grow on trees. Because it's a whole bunch of our ancestors kept telling us, money don't grow on trees, money don't grow on trees. You got to take back the power of your subconscious mind. That's what the enemy is controlling. You got to vote. Somebody, the Queen said, vote on Tuesday. Vote every day for your magic. Vote every day for your for your spiritual cultivation. Vote every day for your subconscious mind and defend it with offense. Period. Moudou's about to come up here. Moudou is about to come up here with some fire. I mean, he was working on it this morning, even this afternoon, about the power of the plant medicine and what his teacher said, Baba Kalindi. He said, you're not doing what your ancestors were doing because you're not doing what they were doing. Now, watch the wordplay in that. You aren't doing what your ancestors were doing because you ain't doing what your ancestors were doing. Ancestors were taking that mushroom, a handful of them, right out the ground, right off the cow dung, putting it in their mouth. Next thing you know, they had a design for the entire plateau of Giza. Oh, I see that. The brothers, the Samoan brothers doing the tattoos. Ooh, drop some entheogens. Look at you. Oh, I can see the tattoo. I'm tracing now. They're not creating a tattoo. They're tracing a pattern that was already on you. So these are the things we have to replace our fears with enthusiasm. So the education is where it comes first. The more education you get at something, and the more practice you get, and the more comfortable you get. In marketing, we call it the know, like, and trust factor. Why did you buy that car? Know, like, and trust. Why did you come here out to support Seasway? Know, like, and trust. You weren't taking a chance coming out here. It was a know, like, and trust factor. You got to have know, like, and trust when it comes to your spiritual powers and spiritual cultivation. I want to turn it over to my big brother, Baba Moudou. He talks about these plant medicines, man, and the power plant medicines, like not just basil and thyme, but he knows about those too, but really, really, really getting sharp and going deep into the power plants. And one of the big things, he's ridiculously humble. A lot of y'all were like, what happened to your hands, right? He'll be like, oh, you know, just got a little burn, but I'm okay. No, those are second-degree burns that he got from saving 3 or 4 people's lives in Detroit, throwing some fire out of the house so the house wouldn't blow up and burn down. This is a superhero. The doctors was like, no, keep him in the hospital because we need all this kind of treatment. We were changing the bandages this morning in the bedroom. It's ugly under there. But he still came out because he's going to do what? Represent. He's already changed his fear into enthusiasm. So, turn over, y'all put your hands together real big for one time for Baba Moudou.
Okay, well, it's my second reintroduction. I'm super glad to be out here in Oakland. You know, a lot of people tell me that Oakland is similar to Detroit in its energy, and its culture and intensity, and it very much is. I feel at home. Man, I feel at home. So I'm just glad to be here. And I was so excited to be here. I put together this like super presentation with all these slides and diagrams because, you know, this is, man, I just want to give y'all all that I can share. So with that, I don't know if we'll be able to get the projector up, but if not, you know, I can make sure I get you this presentation on the slides so you can look at the reference. Because I have a lot of notes, a lot of maps, a lot of reference points that you can further your research on. So the name of this presentation is called The She-Shot Remedy, Epigenetic Remix. And so I took that, I mixed the ancient and the modern. She-Shot, is anybody familiar? Who's familiar with the guy that she-shot? Okay, very few. So we all heard of Ma'at, correct? Okay. And we all heard of Toth. Okay, well, she was the offspring of those two. So she had the combined wisdom of Ma'at, but also the subscription, the truth of Toth. And her job was to write the history of all of us. In science, I guess you would call it the DNA script. But She-Shot was responsible for all memories, all genetic memories. And the reason that I call this the She-Shot remedy is because in law, remedy isn't always just a cure for an ailment. Remedy is an appeal to change things. And in the ancient tradition, She-Shot was an intermediate deity. In other words, she wrote your destiny or your past, but you can always go back and change it. So I call this presentation the She-Shot Remedy, the Epigenetic Remix. Okay. The focus of this talk is dealing with epigenetics and the sacred plant medicine. I started this path when I was like 18. I started training with Kalindi. And I was heavily involved in the movement. I was, BLA, RNA, Black Panthers. I was out there. And so the elders told me that I need to go train with another elder who was very much ranked in this thing. And so when I began to train with Kalindi, we began, of course, doing combative martial arts, MMA style, and other techniques. And, we had a reputation, and our job was to be protectors of our community. So when our luminaries would come, we were on security detail. We would secure their house, their car, their person, everything, until they were safe and secure. And we enjoyed that because it taught us the importance of a warrior class in society. But Kalindi would always say it's bigger than just punching and kicking. It's bigger than punching and kicking. He say the enemies that we're going to engage, that doesn't count. He say there are unseen energies that influence us daily. And so one of the lessons he taught us, like in martial arts, you always start off with it, direct. You might be doing a couple hand locks, and then you start off with doing a little sparring, and then you start with your knives, and then you start with your sticks. And if you notice, the distance increases as your mastery increases. That's because the reality is, as you become proficient in combat, you should be able to see a threat before it gets there. So if you're at the point where you're doing all of this, you're lost. As an advanced martial artist, because you should see the threat, neutralize it before it comes. And so under that philosophy, he understood that if we want to really engage those negative energies that impact our community, we have to meet it at the root source. And so once I reached a certain point in training with him, there was a circle of senior students that he demanded that we cross over into this realm. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Kalindi, but he's an intrepid brother. And so whereas the luminaries of these sacred plants, in particular the sacred mushroom, they say 3 grams. It's like, oh hell no, we started 7. And the reason he said that's right. That's the beginning dose. But he pushed us up to 30, my brother. So, but yeah, yes sir. Yeah, and I could tell by your lyrical flow, bro. You tapped in. Yeah, absolutely. So, but at the time being, we were getting, those of us were getting all kind of criticism from the larger psychedelic community saying, "Oh, you're irresponsible." No. But meanwhile, we were crashing traditionally white rich spaces and letting them know that, no, these plants aren't something that belongs amongst the wealthy, white community. This is something that's belonged to the original people and people all over the globe since the beginning of time. And so as we begin to tell the story, I began to become interested in saying, why is it this schism between community? Why aren't our people engaged in these medicines? Why aren't other POC communities engaged in these medicines as they should be? And so that started me on a historical epic. So, me and my teacher, Kalindi, we went on a world tour. France, Africa, Senegal, South Africa, wherever you name it, we were chasing the plant and trying to find the history. And as we chased the plant and found the history, we realized that traditional African peoples and traditional peoples of South America, Mexico, even China, they know about it. But the forces of colonialism that drove it underground. And as I began to research this historical epic, it went further than I expected. So, let me hit the next slide, just so I can keep reference. Okay, we're going to start at the beginning of the so-called myth or the story of Adam and Eve. Because this is the actual beginning of this epic, where we up to today. And it's the reason why this thing is prohibited. Like most of us know Adam and Eve, but very few of us ever heard of Lilith. Anybody ever heard of Lilith? Oh, good. We know the story of Lilith. Lilith was Adam's first wife. Lilith had a backbone. So Lilith questioned Adam. And Lilith said, why do I have to lay down to have engaged with you? How about you lay down? This is from the text. And Adam got mad and said, yo, God, you see this woman talking back to me? And so as a result, as the ancient stamps say, God banished Lilith. But Lilith, he replaced her with Eve. Lilith was born from the soil, Eve was born from the rib. Eve did whatever Adam said. Eve wasn't very discerning. So, this is actual history. Lilith at night would creep with Adam. And Lilith and Adam had a child. And these children were banished to the dark part of the garden because they had acquired the knowledge of gods. And they were considered demons at this point. From there, Eve stepped up. And once again, she took a bite of the forbidden fruit, theoretically. Now, this story has been taught to us, all of us, in some form or the other, but what's not taught is that depending on where you go in the world, people see it from a different perspective. We were always taught the orientation of this Yahweh, this beneficent creature who put us in this garden. But if you go to the region of Mount Sinai, they say, oh, Yahweh was a trickster guy. And he got into it with his angels because the angels said, wait a minute, if this is divine creation, why are you going to put it in the garden and lock it and make it dumb and say don't eat this and don't eat that? And so that's when the beef started with God or Yahweh and his angels. And he's like, yo, how you going to, just like somebody says, I'm going to buy a dog and keep it in a cage in the basement. He's like, how you going to keep him in the cage? So in this beef, God said, okay, well, look, you go down there. And if you know better, you show better. So he did. And that's where the beef became, because this so-called fruit was considered the fruit of the gods. Now, I know this is like heretical to some people, but as we move on, this was a theme in the church, the early church, even the early beginnings of Islam and Judaism. You always had you always had two sides of all these religious faiths. You had those that were more suited in the mysteries and those that were suited in politics, collecting tithes, controlling the priesthood, controlling society. And so at early stage, you had Christianity that had an Eastern and Western church. You even at a point in Islam, you had dueling deities. People don't know you had Allah and Alat. You know, people don't realize that. Even in Judaism, you had those who were considered strict followers of the code and those who were what we call jubilaic. In other words, they would reach communication with Yahweh through these sacred plants. And so all these monolithic, or these three Abrahamic religions had two sides. You had a secular side that dealt with the world, and then you had a mysterious side. And at a certain point, at about 2,000 years ago, there was wars that were started. There were political wars. And this is something that historians don't speak of. Because like a lot of people say, oh, Jesus in Nazareth. Well, what was there before Nazareth? Can anybody tell me? In that region, what civilization was there? Well, that was Phoenicia and Babylon. Phoenicia and Babylon was very rich. Can anybody tell me how they became rich? They became wealthy because they were the center of the wine trade of the world. Now, the thing about Phoenicia and Babylon is it was nothing unique about wine making. Every culture on the planet made wine, but there was something unique about the wine they made. And they would use this stuff called the fleece, the sacred fleece. And they would line their pots with the sacred fleece, and they would make their wine with it. And for some reason, their wine would take them somewhere that other people's wine couldn't take it. And so they became filthy rich doing so. Fast forward about 1,000 years, you have a powerful Greek army that comes through and takes the remnants of Phoenicia and Babylon, and eventually the Romans. And in that same region, you had the same people who had been colonized and conquered, the same people. But this time they were called the Essenes. This time they contained their ancient traditions. This time they were considered a threat to the Greco-Roman society. See, when we talk about Jesus and him making wine, he was part of a 2,000-3,000 year tradition where they made this psychedelic sacred wine. And it's been proven through anthropology and other means. And so part of his ministry was that he was causing people to question Zeus and Nike and all these other Greco-Roman deities. He was telling people, you are the God. And so when we look at it politically, we see an occupied people, dark-hewn people around Palestine, fighting a colonial Greco-Roman power. Using what? Traditional means of spirituality. And so as we move on through this historical epic, we find a situation where the church began to start this thing called the Reformation. In the Christian church, anybody from the eastern part of the church that dealt with concepts of reincarnation, because in the eastern church you can marry and have children, where they began to literally kill these people off. Many of you familiar with the development of the Christian church, the western side killed the eastern side off. And from that point on, it was a strict interpretation. So I need to speed up very quickly. So epigenetics, she-shots, redemption. I'm going to speed up, and the reason I'm going to speed up is because we have limited time. But in this epic, these plants were taken as a way to remember your ancestral past. And the reason I'm taking you up through this epic is because at this point of this declaration of war, by all three Abrahamic religions on the mysteries, the people of the world that engaged in these mysteries went underground. The Dionysian mysteries went underground. The Ludian mysteries went underground. The rites of the Syrian people went underground. And this is when you got groups like the Freemasons and others who took these ancient traditions and tried to keep them sacred. Knights Templar and all of this. In African society, to this day, it remains a secret. But as we know, colonialism swept through there and tried to take people out. Why am I mentioning this? It's because the collective experience of us, of the world population, being stripped from their spiritual heritage, exists within our genes. Just like the Ma'afa exists in the genes of people of color, of African people. All these historical epics exist in our genes. And so when I call this the she-shot remedy, what I'm basically saying is that through the use of these plants, we rebalance the world power structure. We allow people to question the so-called notions of the divine. Yeah, my time is running short. I had like a super thing, but I'd love to share it with you. But the idea is that you use these plants to cure the illness of your ancestral past. My personal story, I was born fetal alcohol syndrome, you know, and we know alcohol destroys us, I think, worse than crack. But understanding that, yeah, with the sacred plant technology, I was able to go in and revisit the original pain of my grandfather who started the drinking. Now that wasn't it. Of course, when you come to waking state, it comes to attending to your ritual, your shrine. It comes to understanding those mannerisms or those thought loops that were taught you by your grandfather that leads to that behavior. But through these plants, this is how you clean out the junk DNA. But furthermore, our DNA doesn't just contain tragedy. Our DNA contains triumph.
Come on now.
So when you have that great mind in your family, that's in your DNA too. When you have that great farmer, or that great builder, or that just great person, that's in your DNA too. And so when we go into these sacred spaces, the purpose isn't just to look at Smurfette do flips and ride down rainbows and roller skate and say, oh, purple sky. No. The purpose is deep ancestral work. And the reason, that's why I'm so glad to be here, because in this movement, I hate this word, psychedelic. because it has all kind of political, social connotations. But in the psychedelic world, people are taking this as a joke. Right. It's a party drug for them. And that's why when we talk to most people, they say, 3 grams. How are you playing games? Yeah, right. And I took a whole mushroom and watched, watched Led Zeppelin or something. You know what I'm saying? It's crazy. And so it's being abused. And so it's very important that us as ambassadors of this plant bring it back to our community in the right cultural container. So that when people approach it, they can't be like, yeah, I was in college and did that, man. No. You didn't do it the way we did it, because setting is everything. And with proper setting, we go about healing our people. Yeah. I was speaking to my brother last night, working with my cousin. Straight up strung out on crack. Yeah, I use these plants to help him get off of it. I wasn't just trying to, and we're going to sit back and look at the stars. No, I'm going to put you in triple darkness. I'm going to give you enough that you can barely eat before you vomit. And I'm going to let you sit and rest in your demons. And when you tap out, I'm going to come down and hug you. It's simple as that. Of course, afterwards, we do working out, changing diet, right? Breathing practices, changing your circle of who you interact with. But this is the work we're about. We're in Oakland, right? Word up to Moudou on the East Coast. What? That's the work he did, right? Riding that van, healing heroin addicts. That's the work we should be about, liberation. We talk about people like George Washington Carver. What was he famous for? Wrong. He was the #1 mushroom expert on the planet. To this day. That's why he talks to plants. People don't tell you. And so some of the greatest agents of our time were the Grandy Mandy of the Maroons, who would use this plant medicine. This is one of the key tools of our liberation, but we have to use it wisely. And so I wanted to really get deep into there because I'm talking about the science behind the methyl groups, the methyl tags on your DNA, and how those signal and how those squeeze your DNA for different expression, and how you can cause them to release that squeeze and express other forms of your DNA. But we don't have time for that. But I'm just so glad to be out here. Because the reality of the matter is, if you don't have your ancestral shrine set up, you're playing games. You don't derive power in the traditional sense. You don't petition the Creator. Who do you think you are? You got a whole bevy of ancestors there that got your back. So before you go and look for a sky guy, how about you look for grandma? Big up. See what I'm saying? Because they might be right there on your shoulder to help you out. And next time you're dealing with that demon, whatever, and we all got demons we fight, find out when that family dealt with that demon. Sit with that. Feed that altar. Talk with them. Go into that sacred space. Visit that spirit. I know it sounds spooky. Deal with that one. Forgive him. Love him. Love him. Feed his altar. Change the behaviors, and you'll start to see not only the change in your DNA, but the change in your family's DNA, because DNA, as genealogists have already discovered, can be influenced from outside your environment. That means that one positive influence in your family can cause the DNA of your family members to fire differently. You can stimulate certain behaviors and certain feelings just by your behavior. So we are the healers. This is the she-shop remedy. Our DNA is coded, but our DNA is malleable. And we can change it at will. We can get rid of the bad stuff, enhance the good stuff. And so that's why I give big ups to the royal couple over here and the whole team. Because that's what we're representing. Like when we got to the end and you showed the Afro future, what did you say? Oh, we will be here. No, we will be here. Now it's up to us to determine how we will be here. The reason those images impact us because you were there. You were live when Tulsa happened. Hey, I don't believe it, but you were there. You were there when the Ma'afa first began, and you'll be there when the triumph comes. The question is who you will be in that. Will you be a liberator? Will you be an observer? Or will you be someone holding the progress of it? It all depends on how you engineer your personal DNA. And so I thank you for the audience. I thank the space, and I'm thankful to the ancestors. But I want us to understand that this spiritual plant technology is is something that can transform our world, cure addiction, depression. We can stimulate the genius in us. We can forgive and heal ourselves. We can forgive and heal family, even if they're not in our space. So I want us to embrace this, take the message. I'm looking forward to coming back out here. I'm going to be out here all week, embracing the Oakland community. And we just started a movement. And so it's a nationwide movement, global movement. Yeah, we started stuff in Africa. Yeah, we start stuff in Europe. You know what I'm saying? We start stuff. Y'all want to start something? Let's get down and start something. Right? Because, I mean, we can protest for the next 30 years. You're going to morally persuade these people to stop? Forget about it. You're going to outgun them? Forget about it. You're going to outspend it? Forget about it. Oh, we got to bring out the juju sauce, like Ron Dinandi. Right. It's like every revolution we created, we bring out the juju. So I want us to embrace and learn the juju. Don't be afraid of the juju, because it's your juju. It's not Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Asante, Asante.
Give it up, give it up, give it up, give it up. For those of you valiant ones who came, definitely want to announce, and be like letting y'all first to know, like, it wasn't just the pocket dial or the butt dial that got Seasway to accidentally call me that night, and we ended up being on the phone 2 hours and led us here to a sequence of events. But it's also about our DNA firing at times. His DNA recognized my DNA and was like, "You're moving too slow to call him. Let's just me get into the phone and make it happen." You know what I'm saying? And then the original plans we had for us when we came out here totally got changed. Like, "Nah, I'm gonna put y'all in this. Don't worry about it. Come on." We was like, "What?" So we got ambushed in the right way. You know what I mean? To be a part of it in the flow. But we definitely want to announce that we have formed something that looks like us from the top down. A National Entheogenic Council, right? And we missed a lot of things when it was in the quote-unquote cannabis revolution for people of color, black people, whatever you want to call yourselves. But now this thing is coming. You see this decrim nature that's coming? It's moving like mycelium. What you researching is mycelium. Go get mycelium in front of your ancestral shrine. Let them know what mycelium is. Let them know to move through the mycelium through you so you can talk more about it. But the National Entheogenic Council has been formed. We are going to have a boot camp all week. So like I said, we're going to be in Oakland, and we're making things to represent every face that we saw in here. NationalEntheogeniccouncil.com, IG, Seasway. First off, we already drafted Seasway with our number 4 pick. You know what I'm saying? And that was the number 4 pick of the entheogenic draft. Straight out of Oakland. Seasway! We gave him a cap and all that, you know what I'm saying? So you definitely, if you're here connected, you're already connected. You have a very strong, prominent voice on our council that will be representing Oakland and his wildest dreams of his ancestors as well. I don't know if I have 1 more minute left. I definitely want, what's that? Santos is about to play the ancestor song for y'all. Maybe he can play it later on the way out. But we want to give it up for the queen.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We appreciate both of y'all brothers and your expertise and your connection to nature and to plants. Thank you so much for bringing the healing. And thank you for putting on the fire, brother. In a real way. Yeah, absolutely. Let us know why you're here if there's anything that you need us to get for you while you're healing. That's part of what we do here. Pain medicine? Pain relief? You don't even know who you're talking to.